Picture this. You're halfway through your morning commute, right?
Mm.
You're pressed up against the door of a crowded train. Or maybe you've just walked into this high-stakes meeting, and suddenly this wave of absolute panic just washes over you.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going.
Your stomach drops. You realize you forgot to put on deodorant.
The worst feeling.
We have all been there. And, you spend the rest of the day keeping your elbows just glued tightly to your ribs, calculating every single movement, bracing yourself for that inevitable, embarrassing smell.
It's a really highly specific, but like universal kind of anxiety.
Yeah.
You just operate on this assumption that if you sweat, you're going to smell.
Right.
Like it is treated as this unavoidable fact of human biology.
Exactly. But here's the thing. It actually isn't universal at all.
No, it really isn't.
There are people out there who never wear deodorant. And when they tell you they don't need it, they aren't just, being overly confident. They're telling the absolute biological truth.
Yeah, their bodies simply do not produce that smell.
Welcome to the Deep Dive Lab. Today, we have a massive stack of biological research, genetics, microbiome studies. Our mission today is to decode the invisible chemical language of body odor.
It's a fascinating topic.
We want to figure out why we smell, how our bodies manufacture that scent, and how science is completely changing the way we deal with it. So let's just start with the core mystery here. Why does body odor actually happen?
Well, to understand that, we actually have to unlearn almost everything we think we know about sweating.
Okay.
If we look at what scientists were originally trying to figure out, they were battling this fundamental centuries-old misconception, right? The idea that sweat itself is what smells.
Which makes sense on the surface.
It totally does.
Mm.
But when you put human sweat under a microscope, that explanation completely falls apart.
Because we don't just produce one type of sweat, right? Like there's different kinds.
Precisely. Yeah, human beings have different types of sweat glands. So the eccrine glands, those cover most of our body.
Those are the ones that make you wet when you're hot.
Yeah, they produce that watery, salty sweat that cools you down when you run a marathon or sit in a sauna. But then you have the apocrine glands.
Right.
These are concentrated in very specific areas, primarily the underarm. And they produce something entirely different from that watery sweat.
So if the apocrine glands are in the underarm, then their sweat has to be the culprit. I mean, that has to be what smells.
See, that is exactly what researchers assumed for a really long time. But here is the massive reality check. The fluid produced by your underarm apocrine glands is this milky, lipid-rich, protein-heavy secretion.
Okay.
And when it first reaches the surface of your skin, it is completely 100% odorless.
Wait, really? Completely odorless?
Absolutely no smell whatsoever.
Okay, let's unpack this because I'm trying to visualize this. If the sweat itself is totally odorless, why does a crowded locker room smell like a mix of, rancid cheese and pungent onions?
It's a very fair question.
And why is it that some people smell incredibly pungent after a workout while others just don't seem to produce any odor at all? It feels like, well, imagine a factory, right?
Yeah, I like this. A factory.
The factory is pumping out perfectly clean, pristine raw materials onto a loading dock. If the materials don't smell when they leave the factory doors, something else must be creeping onto that loading dock and turning them into toxic waste.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it, actually. The raw materials are pristine. Over time, scientists realized that the human underarm isn't just a random patch of skin.
What is it then?
It is a highly specialized, highly active ecosystem. It is essentially a scent organ.
A scent organ, wow.
But the trigger for the smell, the thing acting on those raw materials on your biological loading dock, that remained a huge mystery for a long time.
So how did scientists figure this out? Because if the sweat is odorless, what is the catalyst? How do we get from a pristine raw material to that terrible locker room smell?
This is where the story gets really interesting. The answer is the story of two massive biological discoveries. And the first one actually starts deep inside your DNA.
Okay, we're talking genetics now.
Yeah, the first major breakthrough was the discovery of a genetic master switch. It is a gene called ABCC11.
ABCC11, what exactly does this gene do? What's its job?
In the simplest terms, it acts as a molecular transport pump inside your body.
A pump.
Right. It is an ATP-binding cassette transporter, which, just means it uses your cellular energy to pump specific molecules across cell membranes.
Got it.
In the underarm, its job is to push those milky, odorless precursors out of the apocrine gland and onto the surface of your skin. But researchers discovered something fascinating about this gene.
What's that?
There's a specific mutation, a change in just one single letter of the DNA code that fundamentally alters how the pump works.
Just one letter out of, what, billions of base pairs?
Yes, just a single nucleotide polymorphism.
Hmm.
And here's how it plays out in the real world. If you have the functional version of the gene, your ABCC11 pumps are fully operational.
Okay.
They are actively pushing those odorless lipid and protein precursors onto your skin. This means you are constantly supplying the loading dock with raw materials.
Which gives you the potential for strong body odor.
Exactly. But if you have the mutated non-functional version of the gene, the shape of the pump is slightly altered. It literally can't grab those molecules.
Oh, wow.
Your body simply doesn't transport those odorless precursors out onto the skin. You supply nothing to the loading dock, which results in little to no body odor.
That is crazy. And wait, there is a deeply weird connection here that we have to talk about. Because this exact same genetic switch doesn't just control underarm sweat.
No, it doesn't.
It controls earwax.
It does. It's one of my favorite biological quirks. It shows how intricately linked completely different bodily functions can be.
So how does that work?
Well, if you have the functional gene with the working pumps, you produce wet, sticky, brownish earwax. But if you have the mutated, broken pump, you not only have no body odor, you also have dry, flaky, white earwax.
Wait, really? So dry earwax means no body odor?
Yeah, the exact same transport mechanism is responsible for both.
That is wild. So who actually has this mutation? Like, is it common?
It is incredibly common in specific parts of the world. To understand why, we have to look at evolutionary history.
Okay.
We can trace this exact mutation back to ancient human populations. We see it in the DNA of the Tianyuan man in northern China from around 40,000 years ago, and the Ustitian man in Siberia from 44,000 years ago.
Oh, wow. So this goes way back.
Way back. And today, that non-functional gene is found in 80 to 95% of people of East Asian descent.
80 to 95%. But why there? Why did this mutation survive and spread so heavily in those specific ancient populations?
It comes down to adaptation. When ancient humans migrated into the brutally cold climates of northern Asia, sweating became a severe liability.
Oh, I see. Because of the cold.
Exactly. If you are in sub-zero temperatures, moisture on your skin can freeze, leading to frostbite or hypothermia. A genetic mutation that reduced unnecessary apocrine secretions wouldn't just be a random quirk, right?
It's a survival mechanism.
Yes. It could have been an active survival advantage in extreme cold. Over generations, that mutation became dominant in those populations.
That makes perfect sense. So for a massive portion of the global population, they literally do not need deodorant because their evolutionary ancestors survived the cold by shutting down the supply chain to the loading dock.
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
But for the rest of us, the supply chain is wide open. We are pumping out those odorless raw materials. So what is turning them into a stench?
That brings us to the microscopic culprits,
Sure.
the second major discovery.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if your body is providing the food,
Yeah.
something is out there eating it. There is a fascinating study that came out in the journal eLife.
eLife, right.
Dr. Gavin H. Thomas and Dr. Michelle Rudden, over at the University of York, along with a team of colleagues, they decided to map the axillary microbiome.
The armpit bacteria.
Yes. They wanted to find the exact bacteria responsible for the smell. And they isolated a major player, a specific bacteria called Staphylococcus hominis.
Staphylococcus hominis. Okay, so this bacteria is just like living on our skin waiting for the ABCC11 pump to deliver the goods.
It is, but identifying the bacteria was really only half the battle. Dr. Thomas and his team actually discovered how the bacteria makes us smell.
How so?
They found that Staphylococcus hominis has its own highly specialized transport system, this protein called SH1446.
Wait, let me see if I can picture this. Is this protein like a mouth, like a microscopic Pac-Man just sitting on the outer membrane of the bacteria?
That is exactly how it functions. This bacterial transporter is highly selective. It waits for a very specific odorless sweat molecule, a dipeptide, to arrive on the skin.
And then what?
The Pac-Man grabs this molecule, pulls it inside the bacterial cell, and basically chops it up using specific enzymes.
But why is the bacteria doing this? I mean, it obviously doesn't care about making us smell bad.
No, it's just trying to survive. The bacteria is breaking down that odorless molecule to harvest the carbon and nitrogen inside it for energy.
Oh, so it's literally just eating.
It's essentially eating. But as a byproduct of that digestion, the bacteria releases a volatile sulfur compound, called 3M3SH.
A sulfur compound. Oh, and sulfur is universally known for smelling terrible.
Yes, specifically, it is a thiol-alcohol. It's in the exact same chemical family as the compounds that give skunk spray and rotting meat their distinctive odors.
Oh, gross.
Right. The bacteria burps out this thiol-alcohol onto your skin, and that specific chemical is what gives off that intense, pungent, onion and meat locker room smell.
Wow.
The odor is literally just their metabolic waste.
So when we are frustrated about smelling bad after the gym, we are completely blaming the wrong thing. We blame our sweat.
And your sweat is innocent.
The real culprit is this microscopic Pac-Man harvesting our sweat for nitrogen and burping out sulfur gas.
Precisely. And if you understand that the bacteria are the ones creating the odor based on what they consume, it changes everything.
How do you mean?
It means body odor isn't a fixed trait. It is a dynamic ecosystem.
Okay, wait. If it's a dynamic ecosystem, then surely our diet plays a role, right? Like, if bacteria are just eating whatever we push out of our pores, doesn't our diet change the menu for them?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And this leads to one of the most counterintuitive discoveries in microbiome research.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Lay it on me.
So, a research team from Charles University and the University of Stirling, including Jitka Fialova, S. Craig Roberts, and Jan Havlicek, they published a highly unusual experiment in the journal Appetite.
Unusual how?
They wanted to see what happens when you feed a person something incredibly pungent. So they took a group of male donors and had them eat bread with butter. But for half the group, they mixed in 12 grams of raw garlic.
12 grams. That is roughly 4 solid cloves of raw garlic eaten all at once.
Right. It's a lot. After eating the garlic, these men wore cotton pads in their underarms for 12 hours to collect their body odor.
Okay.
The researchers then brought in a panel of women to smell the pads and rate the odors on pleasantness, attractiveness, and intensity.
Wait. Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
You're telling me they fed men 4 cloves of raw garlic, collected their armpit sweat, and then asked people to smell it? I am going to push back on this.
Oh, I knew you would.
That makes zero biological sense to me. Everyone knows that when you eat heavy garlic, it literally seeps out of your pores.
Yeah.
You would expect the garlic eaters to smell absolutely toxic.
That is the logical assumption. You would think the women smelling those pads would be completely repulsed.
Yeah,
But the data showed the exact opposite.
the opposite.
The axillary odor of the men who ate that heavy dose of raw garlic was rated as significantly more pleasant, significantly more attractive, and less intense than the men who ate no garlic at all.
I am struggling to understand how that is even possible. How does eating the most pungent food on Earth make your body odor more attractive?
It all comes back to the bacteria. Think about what garlic actually is.
Okay.
It contains highly active compounds, particularly one called allicin, which is created when garlic is crushed. Allicin is renowned for its potent antimicrobial and antioxidant properties.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. When you eat a massive dose of raw garlic, those antimicrobial compounds circulate through your bloodstream and are secreted onto your skin.
It's chemical warfare.
Exactly.
Mm.
Those garlic compounds act like a targeted antibiotic. They severely suppress the staphylococcus populations living in your underarms.
So you are actively killing off the microscopic Pac-Man.
Yes, and fewer bacteria mean fewer enzymes chopping up those odorless sweat molecules, which means dramatically less sulfur waste being produced.
Oh, yeah.
The end result is a less intense, actually more pleasant, natural body odor.
That is brilliant. So by eating garlic, you are shifting the balance of your own skin ecosystem. Although, we should probably warn you listening, if you go eat 4 cloves of raw garlic right now, your armpits might smell great, but your breath will be completely ruined.
That is a very fair warning. The sulfur compounds from the garlic itself do emit directly from the lungs.
Right.
However, science has a workaround for that too. Another study published in the journal MDPI found that eating foods rich in polyphenols and an enzyme called polyphenol oxidase can neutralize garlic breath.
Oh, that's handy. What kind of foods are we talking about?
Raw apples, mint, or lettuce. The enzymes in these foods physically break down the specific sulfur volatiles from the garlic before they can escape your mouth or skin.
So eat a heavy garlic pasta, but chase it with a raw apple.
Exactly.
The big takeaway here is really liberating, honestly. Body odor is not our personal hygiene failure. It doesn't mean you aren't clean.
Not at all.
It is a highly complex, invisible collaboration between your DNA, your diet, and a microscopic ecosystem living on your skin.
And once we view it as an ecosystem rather than a hygiene problem, it completely changes how medicine approaches treating it.
Yeah, we are no longer just trying to mask the smell with perfume.
Right.
So let's talk about the practical application of all this. What does this all mean for us? How is this deep biochemistry actually changing everyday life, especially for people who suffer from severe sweating, like hyperhidrosis?
That's a great question.
Because for a long time, the solutions were pretty barbaric. If you sweat too much, the only permanent solution was heavy surgery to physically cut the glands out.
Yes, the historical treatments were really invasive.
Yeah.
But today, because we understand the anatomy and the chemical signaling so well, we have moved into targeted physics and chemistry.
Okay, physics and chemistry.
Yeah, instead of a scalpel, we group modern treatments by their mechanism. Let's look at physics first. We now have technologies like Mira-Dry.
Miragery, how does that work without cutting the skin?
It uses targeted microwave energy.
Microwaves.
Yeah. A clinician applies a device to the underarm. The microwaves are calibrated to penetrate the outer layer of skin without harming it, but they reflect and concentrate at the exact boundary where the skin meets the fat.
Ah, okay.
The dermal fat interface. This is exactly where the sweat glands live. The concentrated microwaves generate heat and permanently destroy the glands.
So you are essentially microwaving the factory to the ground, but leaving the neighborhood around it totally untouched.
That's a vivid way to put it, but yes.
I also saw a newer treatment called the Brella patch. How does that differ?
The Brella patch uses a different kind of physics called targeted alkali thermolysis. A doctor applies a patch containing sodium to your underarm.
Just regular sodium.
Right. And when the sodium interacts with the water in your own sweat, it creates a chemical reaction that generates a highly targeted burst of heat.
Oh, wow.
That microthermal injury temporarily inactivates the sweat glands for several months. It uses your body's own sweat to trigger the shutoff mechanism.
That is incredibly clever. It's using the problem to solve the problem. But what if you don't want to use heat or destroy the glands at all? Like, what about the chemistry approach?
That is where a newly FDA-approved topical gel called Softra comes in. It uses an active ingredient called sofpironium, which is an anticholinergic medication.
Anticholinergic, meaning it interacts with the nervous system.
Exactly. Sweating is controlled by your parasympathetic nervous system. It sends a chemical signal to the M3 receptors on your sweat glands, telling them to activate.
Okay.
Traditional antiperspirants just use aluminum to physically plug the sweat duct. But Softra acts at the cellular level. It binds to those M3 receptors and blocks them.
Oh, so it cuts the phone line to the factory.
Exactly.
The factory is perfectly healthy. It has all its workers, but it never receives the order from the brain to start production.
Precisely. But, the most exciting frontier isn't about stopping the sweat at all.
Really?
If we look to the future, scientists are asking a completely different question. If the sweat is odorless, why stop the sweat? Why not just manage the bacteria?
Oh.
Right.
Right. If we know Staphylococcus hominis relies on that SH1446 Pac-Man transporter to eat, why not just jam the mouth of the Pac-Man?
That is exactly where cosmetic science is heading right now. Instead of broad-spectrum antimicrobials that wipe out the good and bad bacteria indiscriminately, researchers are designing molecules that specifically block that one transporter.
That's incredible.
You starve the odor-producing bacteria of their specific food, preventing the release of the thioalcohols while leaving the rest of the skin's healthy microbiome completely intact.
You just change their diet.
Yeah.
And if you can't starve them out, you just replace them entirely, right? Because I was reading about microbiome transplants for the underarm.
It sounds like science fiction, but it is actively being researched. You apply a strong antibiotic to clear-cut the existing bacterial forest in someone's underarm. Then you take the axillary bacteria from a donor who naturally smells pleasant, and you transplant it onto the patient's skin.
You are seeding a new forest.
Exactly. If the new, pleasant-smelling bacteria can establish a colony and outcompete the old bacteria, you have permanently altered the person's microbial ecosystem and therefore their natural scent profile.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's synthesize this journey.
Let's do it.
If we step back, there are three major takeaways for you listening. First, your sweat is inherently odorless. The scent you consider to be yours is entirely manufactured by a highly specialized bacterial ecosystem acting on your secretions.
Right.
Second, your genetics, specifically that ABCC11 gene, act as a master switch, dictating whether your body even provides the raw materials to that ecosystem in the first place.
And third, your lifestyle and diet play a massive interactive role. The food you eat changes the chemical environment of your skin, suppressing or encouraging different microscopic populations, which in turn completely alters how you smell.
You know, for centuries, we viewed body odor simply as a nuisance, a dirty problem to be scrubbed away with soap or masked with heavy perfume. But when you look at the deep biology, it is an incredibly complex, invisible language.
It really is.
It is an evolutionary trait shaped by ancient humans migrating across freezing continents, by our DNA, and by our microscopic cohabitants.
It forces us to realize that we are not just individuals. We are walking, talking ecosystems, constantly negotiating with the life forms that live on us.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. Think about the sheer power of these microscopic organisms. If the bacteria living in your underarm can take a single odorless protein, chop it up, and turn it into a chemical signal that makes you subconsciously more or less attractive to the people around you,
Uh-huh.
what other invisible chemical conversations is your body having with the world right now, completely without your permission?
It is a profound realization. We are constantly broadcasting biological signals that we can't even perceive.
Makes you look at that stick of deodorant a little differently, doesn't it? Thank you for joining us in the Deep Dive Lab. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden science of everyday life with us, make sure to follow and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.